Peace be upon you. Welcome back to questions and answers. Keep them up to 50 minutes max, much as we can. This question is from Hakim. You mentioned that Sheikh Nazim said that meditation is a practice for masters essentially. I was wondering why it is that we do meditation in this case. Not only Sheikh Nazim, Ramana Maharishi, Osho, Padmasambhava, Tsongkhapa, Buddha, many, many masters. Many, many, many masters. In fact, I barely know any that say that isn't the case. In the time of not that long ago, Osho and Krishnamurti had this back and forth. Osho critiqued him that he was giving the highest teaching. Osho said he was one of the best at explaining the highest teaching. But it is completely a waste of time giving it to people who can't imbibe it, can't practice it. And it was famously, none of his students attained it. That's what Sheikh Nazim means. You have to do, there's a path. It's only this very kind of weird, recent obsession by so many people that there's no spiritual path. Kind of such an ugly mind. Spiritual path's the glory of being human and how to glorify your humanity. Why we do it? It's part of our tradition. The Nyingma Rabbaniya way is we practice all the stages of the path together. We're learning it as a whole. But that's just knowledge. Realization is very different. And but realization, we'd say in our tradition, it's very difficult to get realization without knowledge of the path. So it all feeds into each other. And also on a simple, basic level, I want you to, everyone who's listening, but the person asking the question, if when you first came along, I told you just to sweep the temple, think about death, and do the 5 prayers every day. Get up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, as they change. Don't do any meditation. And just watch your delusions. Would you have done it? Most people come with a lot of knowledge and information, and a lot of ideas of what they think spirituality is and the path. And if you just attack it, dismantle it straight away, they'll never come back. They'll find somewhere else where their ideas can be maintained. There's a transition where, that's the path, is understanding that our ideas and our way didn't work. And then that leads us to surrender. Or is this something that differs between teachers? Not really. There's just a very few teachers who deny the path. Even those, I don't know about, there's so many these days, but I can say the teachers that I know that are just teaching meditation, they acknowledge that this is that They'll say that grace has guided you here and you're ready for this. And if you're not ready for it, we know that knowledge can be dangerous if we're not ready for certain knowledge. Like if we try and practice it, if our ego gets hold of it too much. The knowledge is all out there. It's not just like hearing it, it's like thinking we know it. Or is it that I have tried jumping ahead instead of getting the preliminaries down? What do you think? I think you know that that's the case. So, we may have done a couple of Lamrim retreats, but it's maybe many people do it. It's just like, oh, that's like a lesser teaching. And those that are wise, they understand to get the foundations as their main practice first. Not that you're not practicing the other things, but the main thing you're working on. For example, you may take gratitude and just work on that, like every day. What am I grateful for? Understanding, contemplating how fortunate I am to have the spiritual path, how fortunate I am to have a guide to help me, because there's so many teachings out there, and so many variations, and so many different ways, and it's like, we understand our mind can't figure things out. How grateful I am to have shelter and food. And we really contemplate till we really realize it and really grok it. Till our main state of mind is joy, fortune, a sense of fortune, of the knowledges that we get and the practices we can do, and not taking anything for granted. This is the foundation in which we're going to move into loving God. For example, I appreciate that you have provided us a library of practices, and I understand the path isn't linear, so it's not as simple as obtaining death awareness, then moving on. Some teachers have emphasized that you meditate on, say, gratitude for 3 months, or until you get it. Then you meditate on death awareness for 3 months, or until you get it, and you move on like this. So what I just said, you may emphasize that practice whilst doing other practice like that. I think exclusively doing it will be difficult, because if you're not having some sense of where the path is leading, it'll be difficult to give up samsara. It's a lot easier to give up samsara if you know where the path is leading. It's like even this very question, it's a lot easier to go back to the preliminaries when you've tried using your own mind to figure out how things should be and what the ego wants to practice. We know there's many famous stories of people with big egos going to masters, like the famous Zen story of the master pouring tea until the cup's overflowing, indicating to the man with information that his information is preventing him from learning, because he knows best. I'm also intrigued because I know you will see where I need to work on certain things. Meanwhile, I obsess over shamatha, for example. It's a very beautiful thing to start to fall in love with the Dharma. Tsongkhapa, he said, we should have an insatiable desire for the Dharma. Jesus said, Amen, until you love me more than your family, you don't have full faith. And you must love God first and foremost, and then love others. Muhammad, he said, until you love me more than your own children, you your faith is incomplete. So this falling in love with the Dharma, with the spiritual path, essentially we're falling in love with God. And that has to be our first and foremost. And when we fall in love with God, we fall in love with the representations of God, the messengers, and then we fall in love with those people who followed the message. And that's our priority. Because we understand that we want God, and we understand that our own mind is the cause of our problems. And we stop letting the mind be the decider. And we fall in love with God. But we're still pulled by samsara. We still have these desires. But whilst samsara is still primary, and we're still, we can say, like tinkering with practice, we won't really progress. Then the shift has to come, where it's essentially, first and foremost, how we base our life around is love of God. And the method not to fool ourselves into thinking it's just God as we want God. We surrender to the representative. And then you have to authentically ask yourself, is my spiritual guide and is God first and foremost in my life? Or is it my wife's birthday party? That comes first. Or my friends going for a night out? That comes first. Oh, I don't want to upset them, and then call it a bodhisattva action. We have to decide inside our heart what's first and foremost, and really check. I want you to, this can be for everybody. Am I taking the doctor's medicine? If the doctor says, I want you to stretch every morning, I want you to take these pills at this time in the morning every morning, and you'll get better. And you go back to the doctor and say, I'm not better. And said, how many times did you do everything I said? Well, I did them a couple of times. You'd think that person would be crazy to blame the doctor, or to think that the medicine doesn't work. Now, the medicine may not work, but you have to try it first. When you've completely tried it, then the doctors may give you another medicine. So you have to ask yourself genuinely, do I get up 5 times? Do I get up in the morning and do my prayer? Do I do it 5 times every day? That's just very basic medicine. Or do I just skimp on it when I don't feel well? Even that's one of the core practices, is to practice when you don't feel like it. Just when you decide that you want to do something else, you will do something else. And the practice will come second, the medicine will come second. Genuinely ask if you've done it, put it into practice. Now, medicine doesn't always taste nice when you have to do it. But it's our experiences. Just doing what you want to do, does it lead to happiness and fulfillment? That's the way the world is, and clearly it doesn't work. It's clear unless you're utterly brainwashed. We can't just do what the ego wants. The ego is the problem. So we need to find a spiritual guide. Not a spiritual guide. Not some fantasy spiritual guide. An actual spiritual guide. And then ask them and be open and practice what they tell you. And there's such joy in that, such confidence that I've got a teacher and I'm practicing, I'm on the path. It's just incredible. That's a question that you ask yourself. And then if you have pain that you're not practicing it, then surrender to the path and feel that joy of surrendering. There's nothing like it. So, I hope this helps in some way. Please ask further questions and contemplate what was said. So, thank you so much, and God bless you. God bless your family. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Ameen.